You're listening to Unmuted with Papamutes.
Welcome to Papamutes, everybody. My guest today is Steve Mancini, host of the Italian Impact Weekly radio show, which airs out of Pittsburgh, my hometown, on Thursdays at 5 p.m. In fact, Steve was born and raised in the same Italian neighborhood I grew up in, Bloomfield. Our families know each other over the years, but Steve and I have never met. There's an age difference, and we both left the area, so I'm thrilled to have him on the pod. Steve, welcome to Papamutes.
Hello, Bob, and thanks for having me. Appreciate it, buddy.
You know, it's funny. I'm reading this, or I'm writing this, and I'm like, I wish I could say it in Italian, but I never learned Italian. Did you ever learn Italian either when you were younger or older? Because it's a little, it's. I hate to admit it, but I never learned Italian.
So, buona domanda. Ho imparato italiano.
Oh,
No. That's actually a great question, and I'll tell you why. So, over about the last 5 or 6 years, I started taking lessons to study Italian.
Really?
And it's kind of a weird thing because I'm like you. When we grew up in Bloomfield, there were still people off the boat living there. You can go down the street, you still hear Italian spoken. I know both. I always tell people this. Both my neighbors were off the boat. And one was Sicilian and one was, I think Charlie was Abruzzese. And I would hear them yakking in Italian. And I still remember when I was a little kid, and I mean little, and John, he would try and teach me a word or two here. Because I would go out, I'd have to go out and pull weeds in the yard, cut the grass. And I always remember he would try and say something in Italian to me, and I would just go, okay, okay. And at the time, I so kicked myself because I couldn't think how fluent I could have been if I had learned those things and stayed with it. But finally, there was like a light that went off, and it was the first time I was going to go to Italy. Was about, I want to say 6 or 7 years ago. Time's flying. I can't remember. Mm-hmm. And I said, I'm not going to go and just be a dumb tourist. You know, I've got an Italian last name. You know, you got family off the boat. You better know some friggin' Italian. So I started taking lessons, and I absolutely fell in love with the language and the culture. So I still take the lessons every week. And obviously, you know, I host a radio show for the Italian culture, and I've gotten involved in a lot of the groups. One quick funny thing was, you remember the Adelaide Club in Bloomfield?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So I used to live behind that, and, you know, you kind of know what it is, but you don't really like, who cares? It's just like, you know, when something's around you, you take it for granted. Then when it's gone, you go, oh man, I wish I would have not, you know, ignored that, because again, you would have learned a lot about the culture. You would have learned a lot about, you know, different people, their families. And in fact, when I was doing here's the connection now. So when I'm doing my family genealogy to trace back, lo and behold, my grandfather used to be a member of that group. And I found his original records. And I'm like, man, that is cool. And I ignored it growing up. And so, yeah, there were some lights that went off later in life, including the necessity, I think, to learn Italian.
Did you, or do you? I know on your show, I listen to not all the shows, but enough to know that you're
not listening to all of them. All right, Bob, I'm gonna let you go.
Not yet. But you usually ask this guest if they know their parents and or grandparents' background, where they came from, etc. Do you know yours?
I do actually. My grandfather, his side is all from Abruzzo, which was, you know, very common in Bloomfield. And I actually went to the town where he got married. Obviously a long time, probably 100 years ago plus now. But I went to the town, and there it was called Pesco Costanza, which is near Adelaide, which is, again, the club where everyone's from that area. My grandmother was from Calabria, and I actually went to the town. In fact, the coolest thing was I found out I have relatives still living there. And there's a small town in the mountains called Mandatricio. And not only are they still living there, some of them, but one of them still owns the original house where my great-grandfather was born in. So the house stayed in the family. So I went back this year, and then I went back last year and actually went and visited the house and saw some of the relatives. Because again, when you trace your roots, you're like, not only are you finding where your family came from, but I think a lot of people, if they did their genealogy, they might be surprised to learn that they probably still have relatives back there. I mean, it's not like the whole family picked up and moved. Usually it was a piece of the family that went overseas, and the other ones would stay behind.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, what happened in a lot of cases was, they kind of lose contact. Like all of mine came over probably right before World War One. So you obviously had a lot going that happened between World War One and World War Two, and then you had World War Two. So clearly contact was lost. So going back and finding them, these weren't like distant relatives. These were literally the people that stayed behind were my grandmother's aunts. They all stayed.
Wow.
I had no idea. So she had actual aunts living there, got married, had kids, and they're still in there. A lot of them are still living in that town. So this wasn't like cousin fourth removed from uncle's cousin married. This is like just a couple of generations removed, very close blood. So it's been this whole thing has been a phenomenal journey for me.
Did you take any photos?
I took a crap ton of photos, and I went back and took even more photos. Because,
I'm talking about the relatives. I mean, your
yes, in
relatives.
fact, I still stay in touch now. Now I actually stay in touch with a few of them. We'll actually chat on WhatsApp or Signal or something. We'll actually stay in touch now. I'll call him. He doesn't speak any English. I speak enough Italian. I can have a conversation. His son speaks some English. There's a few others there that, again, they don't speak English. So I do speak enough Italian to have a conversation with them.
Okay.
And it's just neat. But yeah, I take pictures of them, and I brought some pictures with me to show them. So that was also kind of neat.
Amazing. Now, for people who are not familiar, Bloomfield is, I mean, most cities have a little Italy neighborhood, Boston, Philly, obviously Philly. Do you feel, and I haven't been back, well, I've been back to visit family, my brothers, but not in Bloomfield for about 5 years. But do you feel the flavor, the Italian flavor has left Bloomfield? Because you come in over the bridge and it says Pittsburgh's Little Italy. But I know the 70s and the 80s, I mean, it was reeking,
Right.
So I do feel it's changed.
So I've had the same conversation with a few other folks that grew up and moved away from Bloomfield. And, when you think about the old places, Donatelli's, Lombardozzi's,
God, Dells.
Alexander, all these bars, Dell's, all the old places are gone. But I mean, even like pleasure bars still there, but it's under new ownership.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's just the reality. People get old, their kids take over the business, they grow old, and maybe their kids are like, I don't want to do this anymore. And
I think that's what happened with Donatelli's. Yeah, I mean,
yeah, exactly. And
I walk by that every day.
It's a shame because it was such a staple. The smell, the authenticity of it, and it's gone.
As soon as you walk in, it was like, boom.
Yeah, it smelled like the old country. Now, having been back to Italy now a bunch of times and gone to some smaller marketplaces, I can tell you, when I say it smelled like the old country, it smelled like the old country, and I say that in a good way.
Right. Sure.
But to your point, though, I think the farther we get removed from the actual immigrants, the thinner those bonds become, and the less emphasis on the culture. And I think that is a problem because it's, yes, we're Americans. Hey, I served 20 years in the military. I'm as American as they come. I did my job, but that doesn't mean I can't have a culture that's not, quote, American. And I think what happens is that culture gets so diluted over the generations. Pittsburgh's little Italy, whenever they clean the weeds out for the parade, yeah, then you can read the sign.
Mm-hmm.
But otherwise, what's so Italian about it?
Mm-hmm.
What do people do that keeps the culture alive? And the simple fact that all the old places are gone tells me that it's the Italianness of it is going. Does that mean there aren't people that still live there with Italian surnames? Absolutely. But I would ask them, what are you doing to keep the culture alive? And I think the problem is they're going to say, well, I put a shirt on. I went to the parade. But what are you doing? To your point, do you speak the language? Do you still have the old traditions? The Adelaide Club there, they had to sell the building. It's gone. I that kind of bothered me. I used to live right behind her on Edmund Street. So my backyard was staring right at the bocce court there. Those are the little things that to me define whether the community is maintaining its authenticity. And I think the fact that these things are gone tells me the community is not maintaining the authenticity anymore.